Welcome, everybody. It is, as you, can everybody see my screen? A lot of head nodding, so that's good. It is a new decade of what I like to call budgeting excitement. I heard a big roar from the staff when I said that, so even though you're all muted, I am sure that's still happening here. So we went through the welcome and introductions. Our first order of business will be then to elect a committee chair, and then after that I will get into going through the budget message this evening. So
does someone want to nominate a fellow member, or you can nominate yourself to be the chair of the committee for this year?
I'll nominate Cindy Hillier.
Any other nominations?
I can second that.
So I got a motion and a second for Cindy. Cindy, are you willing to be the chair this year?
Good evening. Wow, my face must match my pink shirt. Thank you for considering me. Could you review the responsibilities, please, other than running the meetings? Could I please understand for sure the responsibilities?
Go ahead, Don.
Okay, so I'll just turn the meeting over to you. I'll let you do the budget message, go through all the budget, and we'll get over, right?
Oh, let me tell you, I'm happy to do that.
Actually,
do not tempt me.
Okay. What your responsibilities would be to open the meeting, make sure all the motions are done correctly. When we get to the opportunity of motions, we'll have a public hearing at the next meeting that we'll go through. That's just making sure that everybody behaves themselves.
I'd be happy to accept that nomination, and with the understanding that as long as I've been on this committee, I've never seen a more professionally run and well organized group. So I will accept this and know that it will be a very easy responsibility.
All right. So rather than going through all the people's pictures and video here, I'll just do a voice vote. All those in favor of Cindy Hillier being our chair this year, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Sounds like it's unanimous, Cindy. Congratulations.
Thank you. Wow.
Back to Don.
Well, so we'll go ahead and get started. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to deliver the budget message. So we'll go through that. I'm hoping at that point we will have the opportunity to discuss some of the smaller funds. For those of you that are new to the committee, when we get to that point, if we have the time this evening, we'll go through those funds. It does not mean that you won't have the opportunity at the next meeting to ask questions about those funds. We just try to get that out of the way of the presentation this evening. So that we don't have to spend the time at the next meeting. We can worry about the larger funds and the ones that have more activity. But before we get started, I kind of want to take a look back in time. As I mentioned, that this is a new decade. So when I did this with the staff when we kicked off the committee, I pulled up some pictures from a budget document of about a decade ago. And it was an interesting juxtaposition. So here's the Tualatin City Council then and now. As you can see, we have all new members, and it's a much better looking group now than it was back then. I think you all agree. The departments, the administration and the finance and court. The interesting part here is there are 2 members of the administration department, and there are 3 of us or 4 of us in the finance court area that are still around. You know, some people will think that changes in that time period is a bad thing. I don't think it is. We've had a lot of good changes, and it's not that we drove people away or they ran off screaming. A number of the people in these pictures have retired. The interesting part about this, for legal and information systems, of these 4 people, none of them are still here. We had a few of those retired. I think we have a really great staff in all those areas right now as well. Community development. Aquila is the one remaining standing person in community development, and she said to me before that she feels that she thinks she still has that suit, and if we were in person, she might have been wearing the whole thing and would have been able to model it for you tonight. Engineering is one of the areas that we actually have the most people still in. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those standing on the street corner there that are still around. The police department, of course, everybody on the left there, or on my left as I'm looking at my screen. The administration area, Jennifer Massey's still here. The gentleman you see on the other side there, this is prior to them being in their current positions. I believe Captain Struckmeyer in the vest was on patrol at the time, and Captain Pickering, I believe, was a sergeant with us when this picture was taken. Parks and Recreation and the library. I think the funny part of this is somehow Carl Schweitzer decided to get in every picture. I don't know quite what was behind that, except for maybe he just liked to be, he felt he was so photogenic that either he photobombed all of them or they decided that he belonged in all these pictures. Julie Ludeman, you'll see is the same in a couple of these pictures. And I believe there's only one other person in that library picture who is still with us today in the library. Again, it's a lot of retirements in there, but we've had some really good turnover in there as well. Public Works and Building. I had to actually put this picture of Terrence Leahy in the water area there because I had to have somebody in either of these areas that were still around. As you can see, we've had a lot of changeover in staff in these 10 years, but I think it's been a great turnover. And we have we had an outstanding staff then, but I think we have an even better staff now. So to go ahead and get started on the budget message, you could imagine that there was a lot of things that have changed, but a lot of things remain the same. So we started this year, as we always do. Back on January 7th, we held our budget kickoff meeting. That's where the opportunity for me to stand up, tell everybody what's expected of them in this year, what they can put in their budgets, kind of some assumptions, what our premise is. Again, when I went back 10 years prior, the budget premise was the same pretty much, of putting together your budgets as keeping your level of service the same. What do you need to do those services? Put that into your budget, keeping in mind, of course, just as things continue to progress. We had the departments put all their information into what's our system, Questica, which is our budget software. By March 1st, their goals and descriptions were in place by that day as well. My department spent the next couple weeks putting together their budget requests. And we decided that the first week of, or the week of March 16th was the week that we would have our departmental meetings with Sherilyn and I and all the departmental staff individually. We decided that that is probably one of the more valuable weeks of the budget process. I was at a meeting last year with, it was a Washington County meeting about their budget, and Chair Harrington found out that I worked for the city of Tualatin. My role, asked me about the budget process and what I thought was my favorite part, or what I thought was the most important part. I said this 1 week in March, because it really gives the opportunity for Sherilyn and I to sit down with our departments, talk over their budgets, really just learn about all the wonderful things they're doing this year, what they have planned for next year. And it's just a very valuable time to sit down and have just some really good conversation and really good meaning. As you can imagine, though, as at that time, the budget process took a few unexpected turns. The department head group started meeting every day the week prior to that. And as the morning of the 16th, we were meeting in our operations training room, all socially distanced apart, 6 feet apart, trying to figure out what direction this pandemic was going to lead us in. Things were changing daily. Things were changing hourly. We were having to get used to a new normal. We made the decision that afternoon to not hold our meetings that week. We obviously had a lot of other things to worry about. So we decided to put off those meetings. We didn't know what the budget process would look like at that point, but we determined that we had other more important things to deal with and decided to continue meeting differently that way and put those meetings off. As I mentioned, a new decade, what we meant by that in this budget process was that we went from the 20-teens to the 2020s. We didn't have in mind, though, was going from March being a year long, going to a decade of April, but that has really been what this has felt like, and I'm sure you all feel the same way. This is how I got to spend every morning looking at this group. It's that it is it's probably the best, it is the best department head executive leadership team that I've ever been part of. And I do have to say it's the best executive leadership team of any governmental entity in the metro area and maybe even in the state. This is an outstanding group to have dealt with the things we've had to deal with in the last month and a half, 2 months. And I would not have wanted to go through it with any different group. Though I could have done without having to look at their faces every morning for a while. Great group, could have planned other ways to start my day. Usually at Sherilyn's the first budget committee meeting, we talk about the things we're doing now and what we did with the money that the committee and the council adopted last year. We decided we weren't going to do that this year because there's been a lot of changes. But besides just the essential services that our employees have been going through, the policing, the maintenance of our infrastructure, the building department, all the things that are essential services, our staff has been creative and have found ways to provide services in different ways. From at the Pulse Center, having this virtual fitness programs for the active seniors. Our police department does some prescription home delivery to those group of residents that are more at high risk, can't get out, but have the need for their medicines. Another thing that's been going on is, and this is one of my the things that I think is the greatest, is our library and story time has done it virtually. And I'd just like to share a little bit of the first ones with you.
Hi, my name is Sam, and this is Amy, and we are a few of the youth services librarians here at the Tualatin Public Library. And in this time where we're trying to have social distancing and the library's closed, we are really sad that we can't offer story time because it's one of the best things we do all week. But we want to make sure we can still do story time with you, so we're going to offer up digital story times.
Oops.
Oui.
What happens when you try to do two things at once?
Shake our hands out, wiggle our waggles away. Clap, gonna clap, clap, clap our crazies out. Clap, clap, clap our crazies out. Clap, clap, clap our crazies out and wiggle our waggles away. Oh, I got one. Can we jump? Let's jump. Let's jump, jump, jump our jiggles out. Jump, jump, jump our jiggles out. Jump, jump, jump our jiggles out and wiggle our waggles away.
I got some sleepies.
Oh, me too.
We're gonna yawn, yawn, yawn our sleepies out. Yawn, yawn, yawn our sleepies out. Yawn, yawn, yawn our.
Okay. Hopefully you get to enjoy that. I didn't see anybody up and dancing along with them, so hopefully, I know these are opportunities that are really rough trying to do all this virtually. Anyway, during the week of May 4th, we had the opportunity to celebrate Public Service Recognition Week. The City Council was also able to recognize the day-to-day work of the city staff at their April 27th meeting by passing the proclamation you see on one side of your screen there. And they were able to share also their personal appreciation for the city employees. We typically have an event or two that week, but of course, since we were not able to be together, the department heads were able to at least have a message to our employees, all of us holding up a sign saying, thank you for everything you are doing. You are so appreciated. We have a lot of pride in our employees. And I got to say that Cheryl and I have talked about this, that there is just a ton more pride we have in our employees for what they have done and how flexible they have been and how they've gone about providing services to our residents, to our customers during this very difficult time. And we thank the council for their support of staff. The proclamation that was passed, and again, is just the wonderful things that all of you had the opportunity to say about staff was very much appreciated at the executive leadership level, down to management, down to the frontline workers. It's great to work for an entity that has that kind of support from our leadership. So we finally did have meetings. We put them off for about a month. So we had meetings with the departments by Zoom, or Sherilyn liked to refer to it as Brady Bunch budgeting. We did this around the week of April 16th, 17th, so just under a month ago, we were finally able to have those meetings. They were great. It would have been great to have them face to face, but it was an opportunity, at least for us, to have that week of meetings and have that opportunity to meet with our staff. It did cut down on the process a little bit. And so you'll see some of those changes this evening and in the budget document that you have in front of you. As mentioned, the document, we did change the format a little bit this year, and that was due to the amount of time that we had to put this document together when we finally were able to get all the numbers put together. And I'll talk about some of the adjustments to the numbers we had to do. So we have the revenue and expenditure details all behind one tab. Those of you that have been on the committee before and the council before know that we used to have a separate revenue section and a separate expenditure section. This year, we determined that at least for the presentation and for how we're going to be going through this and the binders that you have in front of you, it was better to put them all together. You'll have the revenues first for a fund and then those expenditures for that fund right behind it. So that's one change that we did this year in the budget document. We still do have in the revenue area a lot of the revenue background, our revenue sources, because property taxes is a huge part of our general fund revenue. We do have an overview of property taxes. We have the revenues by fund. We have a summary of the property taxes. And what that summary is the average tax bill in Tualatin. And then what that costs a typical resident, how much of that does go to the city, because I believe it's about 13% of your total tax bill is what comes back to the city. And then what that pays for. So you'll see that on one of the pages. We still also do have the budget summary section, and that has things like where the money comes from, where the money goes, and then a summary page for every individual fund. What you see on the screen here is all funds combined, and you will see that we have just about $133.8 million proposed budget this year. So as I mentioned, going into the week in midweek of March, we had balanced all the funds. Everything was balanced. We had everything together. But then it became apparent to us that some things were going to have to change. This was not a new year. This was not our normal. We are now under a new normal. We had to look at how this was going to impact our budget going forward. As you can imagine, there's a lot of unknowns right now, even as we sit here. I would say even by the time when I put these numbers together, some of these numbers together about a week plus ago, I think there's still, we're starting to see some of the phase potentials for reopening. That has an impact. So we had to look at what the governor's stay-at-home guidelines were, figure out what kind of that length of impacts we might see in the budget. We're going to have some revenue impacts, and I'll talk about those this evening. There are some revenue impacts that have a reduction in revenues, bring upon also a reduction of expenditures. For example, our recreation programs. We're not putting the programs in. We don't have a lot of the temporary staff that staff those events. So you see a reduction of revenue, but also a reduction of expenditures. The trick for me and for our staff was determining what those levels were and how then we put together the budget. So I took the approach of making an assumption of not being back in full duties, or maybe not even full, but having an impact of this on our budget through through September 30th. So the first quarter of the fiscal year. And I kind of looked at that as my guide of when I was looking at what revenue impacts were. I do have some numbers if it goes beyond that I can adapt and work along, but the numbers you're going to see in this budget are based upon a premise of an impact for the first quarter of the fiscal year. With that in mind, the total budget that will be in front of you during this process is $133,841,320, which is a 1.09% growth over the fiscal year 1920 adopted and amended budget. So before this process changed, we were anticipating a growth in a number of our revenues. And these are the revenue categories that you'll see in the budget. Charges for service make up about a third of our total city revenues. Property taxes and transfers and other, about a fifth, about 20%. And then licenses, permits, fees, intergovernmental revenues are both about 12%. And then fines and forfeitures are just under 2%. This chart here will show you that there are a couple categories of budget or revenues that are increasing this year. The majority of them are going down or decreasing. When I put this initially together before the middle of March, there were a majority of these that were increasing. What you do see here, though, is that our total revenues between last year and this year are pretty much the same. There's a 0.1% increase of our overall revenues. So there's two categories that are going up are kind of offset most of those that are going down. So property taxes, let's start there because that is, I said on the general fund side, the largest percent of our revenues. And I do want to talk a little bit about property taxes because that is our steadiest revenue source. And I'm anticipating that is going to stay steady this year. And I'll talk a little bit about the property tax system, why I'm anticipating that it will be steady, and then some of the reasons behind that. Anyway, back in the mid-90s, Measure 50 was passed, and it created this divergence between assessed value and real market value. So the red line is real market value, the blue line there is our assessed values. What Measure 50 did is it created assessed value, it diverged it from market value. So even as market values were going up and down, and you can see that big drop during the recession in the early, or 2008 timeframe and after that, as market value was going up, it had no impact on assessed value. Assessed value was set back with Measure 50, and it grows by 3% typically on properties as those grow, and then any new growth that we have. So we have seen some positive assessed value growth really climbing the last few years. A couple years ago, we were over 6% of assessed value growth. I'm anticipating a 4% growth in assessed value this coming year. I'm not changing that assumption based upon the assessed values are put in place as of January 1st. So in January 1st of 2020, the assessor's office looks at that day to set assessed values, and that is what our property taxes were based upon. So it was all prior to any of the impacts of the pandemic. Because it's assessed value and that'll continue to grow, even if the markets decided to drop, we have a huge area before that would drop down below. So our assessed values will continue to grow under this scenario. The second part of the equation, and then this is another area that I'm hearing some people talk about, is property tax collections. Washington County has one of the higher collection rates for property taxes in the state. We are over 96% typically of the property taxes that get collected. Going back to the recession, we did not see collection rates drop for a couple reasons. One is that we had a lot of people that pay their property taxes as part of their monthly mortgage payments. So as long as they were making their mortgage payment, property taxes were getting paid. So then when it came November, the first installment, those taxes were being paid. In that time, we had a lot of foreclosures, but those property taxes were still getting paid because banks did not want to lose their interest in those properties. So they were making sure the property taxes were being paid. So we're not anticipating a huge drop in the collections overall. We have a conservative estimate for collections. I estimate a 95% collection rate, so I already factor in a lower percentage of collections when I put together my estimates than the county's actuals collection rates. What I think we may see in this, I think May's property tax collections that people have to pay in the next few days, that'll tell us a little bit if we're seeing any impacts. But right now, if you pay your property tax in November, you get a 3% discount. The next installment, if you don't pay it in full, is in March and then in May. So you see that in this chart, we get over 90% of our property tax collections of revenue we get in is in November, December. You see that little bit of box in March, that's for those second installment payments. And then in June, we get the money for the third thing, the third installment. I think what we may see in this case is those collections being spread out. People who may not have the money to pay it all in November may take advantage of paying it in installments. Now, the hard part that I'm going to have here in estimating what those revenues may look at like is if you pay in November, you get a 3% discount. If you pay it in installments, you lose the discount. So our revenues may go up there. It may just be spread out. It may be a cash flow issue. Again, we'll monitor that. I'm talking with the league and people around the state. Right now, we feel we're pretty confident that our revenues for property taxes will stay steady. License and permits. This area, you'll see it's just a very slight decrease. We're not seeing a noticeable decrease in the volume of development and construction. Like building permits and fees are part of this category, so I'm not anticipating that to drop. So we're going at this point with our assumptions that were built into the budget initially of some growth in development and building permits. One area that we will see an impact is the business licenses is part of this category. As businesses don't reopen, as the state reopens, I'm sure we'll see an impact there. We won't know what that impact is until the industry start to reopen and see what businesses don't reopen and what impacts that has. I have reduced that revenue to take that into consideration. Franchise fees is another one that I am anticipating a reduction in. This is for our the franchise fees that we get from PGE for our electricity franchise, Northwest Natural for our gas franchise, as well as other cable and so forth. The interesting dynamic, I think, here a little bit is we will see anticipating increase in electricity and gas in the residential side as more people are home. But as commercial and industrial, as businesses are closed, we'll see a reduction in the usage there. What that's going to be, again, is kind of hard for us to estimate at this point. I have made a reduction in this category by anticipation of this. Again, as we see what industries are opening, what businesses come back in play, we'll continue to monitor that and be able to make any adjustments. But I have made a significant reduction in this revenue for that potential. It is a 6.4% reduction in that category that's built into the budget right now. Intergovernmental revenue, this is the other category that is increasing. It's almost a 14.5% increase. And this is made up of a couple different areas. The state shared revenues, this is our share of the cigarette, liquor, marijuana, and gas taxes. The liquor and marijuana tax, we are actually seeing staying steady, if not going up, based upon people being home and buying more of those products. Gas taxes are obviously going down. There's less cars on the road, so we are seeing an impact on our gas tax revenue. What is built into the budget is a reduction and an estimate that I received from ODOT a few weeks ago of their projections of the reduction in the current fiscal year as well as next fiscal year. So that is built into the budget as well. Part of the reason why this is going up, though, beyond just those areas, is we have some revenue coming in for the Herman Road project. So we have a grant money coming in from Metro related to that project, as well as there are some sewer projects. There are 2 sewer projects in the Sewer Development Fund that are actually being paid for by Clean Water Services. So those revenues are showing in this category, and that's really what makes up that increase of the 14.5% in that area. Fees and charges, there's the single most reason this is going down. Most of our fees and charges are staying pretty consistent or stable still. This category is going down in the 1920 budget. In the Parks Development Fund, we had the old RV Park of Portland site that now is being called the Commons on the Tualatin. They're paying their Parks SDC in this current fiscal year, and they were budgeted there. In the 2021 budget, we don't have a project like that budgeted, so there's a significant reduction in SDC revenues in the Parks Development Fund, and that's what makes up this reduction in this category. Charges for service, the biggest pieces of this are our revenue from our water, sewer, and storm utility rates. The big reduction here, though, is water consumption. We have seen a significant reduction in water use starting in this fiscal year and is continuing into next fiscal year. Therefore, since we are selling less water, obviously people are using a lot less water, we're selling a lot less water, so we've redone our estimates in this area, and that's built in here. Other areas that are in this category are we process passports in the city offices. The police department offers fingerprinting services. Obviously, with the city buildings being closed right now, we're not doing those services. We're not anticipating those starting up for a little while. So those revenues have been adjusted for that as well. The other piece of that category is our recreation programming revenue. As you know, right now, we have not scheduled some rec programs. We are not at the point of making those decisions of other programs during the summer and beyond. The Parks and Rec department is keeping a close eye on that. They are, determining at what dates they need to make those decisions. So what we have built into the program right now, or the budget right now, I have not reduced the revenues because those decisions have not been made. The other side, though, is because these are programs that are cost recovery, we have the expenditure side that is also still in the budget. If programs do not occur, we won't collect those revenues, but we also won't collect the expenditures. It is pretty close to a one-to-one relationship. So I've left both sides of that in for right now. If before we adopt the budget or approve the budget, some decisions are made, we can adjust both those levels accordingly at that time. But I felt comfortable going with that way of going about it, since it's both sides and the net impact is negligible or pretty much close to zero by leaving those in right now. Fines and forfeitures, that we are seeing a decrease there. The two biggest categories here are our municipal court fines and then also our library fines and fees there. So with less vehicles on the road, we are seeing less citation volume. That has been factored into this category for next year, again, based upon the timeframes through September 30th. I factored in a reduction factor there, as well as on the library fines. Obviously, if the library is closed, we're not collecting fines, and I would anticipate for a little while that we won't see any fines in there. I think I've dropped that pretty low for that piece. The transfers and others, the big change here, there were some transfers from the Water Development Fund into the Water Operating Fund, so transfers in. We have less of those projects happening this year, so we're not seeing that. But the biggest change here is our interest revenue. Obviously, interest rates have fallen significantly. We are seeing, therefore, a reduction in our investment interest revenue, and I have adjusted for that. You will remember that we started going to an investment advisor about a year ago. The good news there is because we have changed our strategy, we've gone out a little bit further. So we still have a lot of investments that are out longer term that have higher interest rates than what we can buy right now. So our portfolio is still, last I saw, was a little over 2%. And so we are still seeing a reasonable interest rate. Obviously, as some of those mature, we're buying lower rate investments. That will continue to drop, but it will be a slower drop than if we were just in the stay pool and not having the strategy we have. So that's our revenue picture. I feel that we've gone pretty conservative with it. I feel pretty good with the reductions that I've made based upon where we're at today and the assumption going through September 30th. Again, we will continue to monitor this. We will continue to monitor what's going on around us. And if we need to make any adjustments, I can take that back either through this process or back to council after the budget year starts. But I feel real comfortable with where we're at with the information I have right now. So moving on to our expenditures. So these are the kind of groupings of where our money goes. Obviously, public works, because of all our infrastructure, water, sewer infrastructure, and so forth, is our largest category. That also has things like our transportation project fund and so forth in it. And then, policy and admin, public safety, and the other categories. Overall, we are seeing about a 4.1% decrease in our expenditures from the adopted and amended fiscal year 1920 budget. You'll see personnel services, this is a 4.1% decrease. Usually I stand up here, or right now I'm sitting, but usually I stand in front of you, and every year I get to talk about PERS. And usually I have a very gloomy message with PERS. This year I gotta say it's a little bit better of a message. The legislature back in the 2017 session created this employer incentive fund. And they funded it in the 2019 session. And what the idea behind this was it gave us the opportunity to make a deposit into PERS as a side account, which helps smooth out your rates in further years. And they had a 25% match on the side account that they were offering up in this program. When we ran the numbers, I brought it to the city council and asked for the authority to participate in this program. So back this last fall in October, they gave me the go-ahead and direction to do a $2 million payment into this employer incentive fund, which we did. We had a transitional liability that was in place. So when the city first went into PERS a number of years ago, we had to buy into the program, and we've been paying that liability off for a number of years. We still had about $1 million liability remaining out there. The PERS required us to pay that off first, and then the remaining amount, so the remaining $808,000 of that after the transitional liability was paid off, went into the side account. They matched it at 25%. So our side account after that match was just over $1 million. What that did to our rates, and we actually were able to make this effective this last November 1st, so we've been taking advantage of this savings in our rate. The transitional liability was 1.45% of our PERS rates. The offset now to the side account was another 0.64%. So we saw an immediate reduction in our PERS contribution rate of 2.09 percentage points. About $180,000 of savings in the current budget year, and we're anticipating about a $300,000 savings in the budget this next year over what we would have been paying in the second year of the biennial rates that we were under prior to this. So great news. I thank the council for bringing that forward and supporting that. We felt comfortable doing it. We have seen a great reduction that has helped that reduction in our personnel services budget going forward. On the materials and services side, we are seeing about a 2.25% increase in this, and it's mostly due to items that are outside of our control. Things like the utilities are, I'll talk a little bit about our WACA, our dispatch contract, but the utility side, there's two components that hit our materials and services budget. The first is obviously we pay utilities on our own facilities. We use electricity, we use gas, we use garbage services, all those utilities we still have to pay. As those rates go up, our costs go up in those areas. The other side is because sewer and storm rates, a portion of the sewer and storm rates are set by Clean Water Services, the part that we then collect for them and then pass through, that expenditure, the part we pass through is sitting in materials and services as well. So that's a secondary side of utilities rates. Now Clean Water Services is taking to their board recommending the sewer and storm rates on July 1 don't increase. They will revisit that in the fall as they get a better idea of the economy as well. The good news on this slide is our dispatch services contract. Every year we stand in front of you and talk about a 7% increase in our dispatch contract with WACA, the Washington County Consolidated Communications Authority. Because of the 911 tax increases that went into effect, they are seeing more money because they are funded from two sources, mostly by the 911 tax. The second half of their funding, or the second side of their funding, is from all of our agencies that use their services. We have to pay rates to them for that service. Because the 911 tax revenue for them has gone up significantly, we are actually seeing our dispatch contract go down this year. So that's really good news. On the capital outlay side, we are seeing a 6.4% increase over the current year budget. Some of the projects that are planned in this include water projects on Blake Street to 115th, out on Tualatin Sherwood Road, work on the B1 reservoir. The sewer and stormwater division will be busy this year with work on the 65th Avenue Nyberg sewer trunk line and stormwater projects such as storm pipe replacement, work on the Sweek Drive Emery Zadell retention pond, and the Venetia water quality facility. A couple other items that are part of that capital outlay budget, of course, is our transportation bond projects, our Tualatin moving forward, so our public works staff and others are staying hard at work on this program. and you're seeing a lot of things that are going on right now and a lot of things planned for next year. The list on this slide are the projects that are programmed into the budget for this upcoming year, including the continuation of the Garden Corner Curves project, beginning the project at Tualatin Sherwood Road, Martin Avenue to I-5, the neighborhood traffic safety program, and others you see here. A lot of really good projects planned, and they're continuing right now. The other part that is in this budget is continued construction of the Tualatin City Services Center out on the operations site. Construction has begun. If you were to drive by there, you'll see the construction fencing. An old warehouse facility structure has been torn down. That project has started construction. It is estimated to be complete in the first year of calendar year 2021. That will house our development services, our building department, planning, engineering, and all our utilities. We're going to gain a lot of efficiencies for our customers and our residents, but kind of a one-stop shop approach out there. What this will also do for us is allow us to move functions into the city offices building that aren't there right now, including lease space across from the library and city offices that houses our administration area. We lease that office space. So we'll be able to move Sherilyn and her staff over to our building. That's where my office is right now. We'll be able to move all that staff over. I also have most of my finance department, besides my court staff, which are in the police department, which will also move out to the new city services building. The rest of my finance accounting staff are in Lafke House in the park, which is not an ideal situation for them, nor is it for the rest of my department. So they'll get to move into the city offices as well. What that'll do is also create a number of efficiencies by having a lot of like services in one place, for customers, for residents, but also for us that have to work together, creates those efficiencies as well. So you see those items that are in the capital projects funds as well this upcoming year. Debt service, we will be borrowing. So the construction part of the $8 million project cost for the city services building, we had paid for about half of it in cash. I'm going out for a bank loan for the other $4 million. So you'll see the debt service going up a little bit for the beginning of the payback of that loan as well. The Tualatin Development Commission, I guess the exciting thing, wish we didn't have to do it, but the exciting thing that we were able to do was the Economic Stabilization Fund. The council or the commission set aside $250,000 of non-tax increment revenue to create a grant program for businesses that were being impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. As you can imagine, the need was great. We had 143 applications over a 1-week period, asking for $1.3 million. We had $250,000 to give. We were able, though, to award 54 small business grants from this fund, ranging from $579 to $10,000, which was the max that was part of this program. Those 54 businesses at the time these grants were awarded, we're employing 149 individuals, and we gave an average grant out of $46,000 or $4,600. 75% of those grants went to the retail, restaurant, services, hospitality, entertainment, and wellness classified businesses. And those businesses were 44% minority owned and 47% women owned. That was a valuable program to helping those businesses that we could during this time. While this has been a challenging beginning to the new decade, I'm confident that with this group, we will be even stronger on the other side of this crisis when we get out of this. I am very fortunate to be working with a great staff and a great set of leaders, starting from the city council to the executive management team to the frontline employees that you see also here on the screen. This budget And our financial condition is just another example of while the great work our employees do, the leaders we have. Missed a slide in there. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. My sincere thanks go to everyone that was involved in this budget process, especially given the change of our budget process come mid-March and completely having to change the way we went about doing things. But we continue to provide outstanding services to our residents, our customers. They've come to expect and appreciate those from the city. We're doing our best that we can to continue that during this crisis, this pandemic. We will continue those when we all get back to work on the new normal basis. And we get to show why Tualatin is a great place to live, work, play, and visit. Madam Chair, that is my presentation on the budget message.
Thank you, Don, and your team. Like I said before, it's just exceptional, the work that you've done, and that our city councilors and everyone thinks so forward, and really, truly the mantra, a great place to live, work, play, and visit, it comes through in your work, and so thank you. One note is we would like to review and approve the minutes of our last meeting. And so I've asked that maybe Nicole, are you prepared, Nicole, to, well, actually, Mayor Bubenik reminded us that we needed to do that. So thank you to him. And I wonder if Nicole or Dawn, or you're prepared so folks can see those. I do think I heard or saw, excuse me, at least one.
The minutes are available on the website as part of the budget packet, and I also dropped them into the chat on the side of the Zoom.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Sorry, I just wanted to be sure if everyone's technology is a little different. We all navigate this a little bit differently, so wanted to be sure. So thank you.
Cindy, you need a motion for the approval of the
Well,
minutes?
I do believe that there was at least one correction. The date on it, sorry, my notes got on a different page. Excuse me, just a moment, please. Did I understand that we have a date change, Mayor? Or a correction, excuse me?
The date was incorrect on our meeting agenda for today, but it's correct in the.
Oh, excuse me. Got it. So the minutes. So yes, please. We would like a motion for the minutes then, please.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been approved or moved by Paul and seconded by, will you please say your name?
Brittany.
And seconded, thank you, Brittany. And seconded by Brittany to approve the minutes as submitted. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye or a thumbs up if you choose to. Well, let's come to an understanding. Should we do it voice? We did that before and I think that worked, or we'd want to do thumbs up, sorry. I think, let's just signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you, motion carries. Okay. Next on our agenda, sorry, I need to pull that up. What is next on our agenda? Are we?
Well, I could go through, so we could begin the review of the budget. I could probably go through this in about 5+ minutes. Just get it quickly. I know we have another item on our work session agenda. Mayor, do you think we have time to go about another 5-10 minutes in this meeting?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay. Let me get through this pretty quickly. Again, does not mean that we're not going to revisit this. You have the opportunity to ask questions about these funds in the next few weeks. And also you can bring it up that night. I just want to go through so we can just get that presentation part done this evening. So the core area parking district funds, and these in your binder, if you wanted to look through this at the time, is on pages 118 to 120. We did reduce the revenue again to the COVID-19 impacts. Won't know for sure what impacts this will have until such time as industries start to reopen, and then we can get the opportunity to see which businesses that are in the core area do not reopen. But
Don,
I have.
can you share your screen, please?
And could you tell us which page again? You were muffled in the
I'm sorry,
page that you were starting with, please.
Page 118.
And you need to share your screen, please.
Oh, well, that could help, huh? I did not realize it had not been. There we go. There we go. Everybody see it now?
Yep.
Okay. On the expenditure side, the operations are staying status quo. There are no changes to the operations of the district, and the reserves that are in there for future capital needs. The next budgets that we'll go over real quickly are our development funds. And I see I have a typo. It's really the Transportation Development Tax Fund instead of Transportation Development Tax. So this will start on page 121. It'll go to 132. Boy, I was having a real hard time typing when I did the slide, obviously, earlier. Talk about the water development, sewer development, stormwater development, and the transportation development funds. These are our system development charges for those utilities. What is common across the revenues of all these funds are kind of placeholders, estimates of what SDCs might come in. We don't worry about the revenue side as much. We will deal with anything on the expenditure side. In the expenditure sides for that, in the water development, we have dollars that are being transferred. So let me step back before I go into the exact details. Either if a project is completely SDC eligible or can be paid out of system development charges because it's growth based. If it's 100% that project is SDC eligible, then that project is budgeted in the development fund. If a portion of it is SDC eligible and a portion is being paid by other funds, then it's in the operating fund, and then the development fund transfers out to the operating fund for that portion. So you'll see in some of these are in transfers out, some of these are in the capital outlay lines. In the water development fund, there's a contribution to the Blake Street water line. In the sewer development fund, here's the two projects that I mentioned on the intergovernmental revenues that are reimbursed by Clean Water Services, as upsizing the sewer pipes on 105th Avenue, as well as the North Martinazzi trunk line, which will help us also get ready for potential development down in Basalt Creek. On the stormwater side, there are capacity improvements in infrastructure that will be part of the transportation bond projects. So that is programmed into the Stormwater Development Fund. And on the Transportation Development Tax Fund, a portion of these revenue or a portion of the traffic signal at Martinazzi and Sagert is SDC eligible. So you'll see a transfer for that, as well as pedestrian and bike safety projects that are in the Garden Corner Curves Corridor are factored into the transportation expenditure side. I didn't give you a page number on this. It's 145 to 147. This is the Tualatin Scholarship Fund. This is for our science and technology grant. So we have, in the revenue side, we have received another grant this year, so we'll be able to give 2 scholarships. And the expenditure side are the expenditures for those 2 scholarships. And the remaining amount is reserved in there for future future scholarships. The Tualatin Development Commission, this is found on page 157 through 162. During this current fiscal year, we closed down the Central Urban Renewal District, or the commission did. Remaining funds from that went into the Tualatin Development Commission Administration Fund in order to do a study of potential for future urban renewal districts. In the Leviton Tax Increment District, we still have capital dollars there, and there'll still can be continued discussions of how to utilize those capital or those dollars out in the Leviton Tax Increment District. I went through that kind of fast. I like to go through those funds to introduce them these nights, the first night, because there's not a lot of activity there. And that way we can spend on our May 20th meeting, we can spend more time going into a little more in depth on the funds that have a lot more activity. So the agenda for that night will be that we'll have, I'll actually remember to do the minutes ahead of time this time. We do have a public hearing that is required by state statute for a portion of our liquor tax revenues. What I ask between now and then, as you go through your budgets, please send those questions to me ahead of time. That way it gives me the opportunity, if there's any research that needs to be done and more in depth, I have the opportunity to get with the departments and get those answers for you. I will also then put together a question and answer document. I'll go through that night on the 20th. So please send those to me ahead of time. And we will take some time at the beginning of that meeting to talk over those questions and answers. We'll continue our discussion of the budget. We will take public comment that evening. My hope is that before that meeting is over that night, we'll be ready to approve a budget. If so, I will have the motions for you that evening. If we are unable to finish that evening, we'll schedule the third meeting. But so that'll be our agenda scheduled for the 20th. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other additional questions, or people know how to get a hold of Dawn, obviously through the email you received, if you have questions about things? If not, I'd like a movement for adjournment, please.
Motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
It's been moved by Valerie and seconded by Paul that we adjourn at 6:09 p.m. All in favor of this motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Thank you. This motion carries.
Thank you, Cindy, for running a terrific meeting.